think it's
Are we ready?
Yeah.
So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to session 8 from Standards Practice, Creating Accessible Assessments at Scale. Our presentation will focus on web standards and the principles that make test questions work across many assistive technologies. I'm Christine Lowe with the Accessibility Compliance Office, and I'm joined by Greg Bales, who leads our content accessibility at the College Board. Today, we will showcase best practices in creating digital assessment content that is accessible by design. For those of you who are not familiar with the College Board, since 1899, we have been developing standardized tests for access to higher education with the SAT and the Advanced Placement or AP exams. In 1939, before there was even a mandate or a law, we started to provide accommodations for students with disabilities. The College Board made some early moves towards digital testing beginning in 2018, where we basically took a paper form and underwent a mode transformation. And then in 2020, like the rest of the world, we went headlong into a global pandemic. This kind of forced us into fast-tracking our digital testing initiatives. In 2024, the full SAT suite of assessments went digital on our Blue Book, which is our digital testing platform. In 25, we developed 29 digital AP exams. We have delivered more than 10 million tests digitally since January 2024, and we provide accommodations on average to more than 6,000 students with disabilities each year, ensuring that our products and services are designed and delivered inclusively. At the College Board, we embrace digital testing by learning that accessibility is the foundation of equitable digital assessments. Now, being accessible by design. So what does that mean? It mitigates risk to test content by avoiding late-stage remediation. It improves usability for all students, not just those with accommodations. And it simplifies delivery both to students on test day and to the classroom later. Today's section will explore how College Board applies standardized-based design to enable accessibility at scale, seamless integration with assistive technologies, and broadly usable and fair tests. So when we talk about accessibility standards, it's easy to think of them as a technical checklist, but in the context of assessments, these standards do far more than ensure compliance. They're the building blocks making accessibility possible across programs, platforms, and devices. So starting with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, we use a lot of acronyms in accessibility, which provide the framework for all accessible content. It was developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C. WCAG is an internationally designated standard with global recognition, and it provides regulatory and legal alignment and promotes harmonized standards across regions, such as in the European Union, it is EN 301-549. As an officially universally accepted measure for digital accessibility, it ensures that content is perceivable for visually impaired students. It's operable through both keyboard and alternative input devices. It's understandable to a wide range of cognitive abilities, and is robust enough to work across technology. For digital assessment, that translates into stable, testable content that behaves predictably for every student across every platform. So the next standard is the MathML, and this is particularly important for STEM assessments. MathML encodes the structure and meaning of equations in a standardized way. Whether a student uses a screen reader, a refreshable Braille device, or a multi-line Braille device, they can access the same math content with the same level of clarity. ARIA, or Accessible Rich Internet Application, and Semantic HTML, those two go hand in hand. These are not visual changes to the content, but rather structural. They ensure that the digital test content is understood by assistive technologies. Think of ARIA and semantic markup as a navigation system that helps a screen reader understand this is a stimulus, this is a question, and these are the options. And finally, speech synthesis markup language, or SSML, more acronyms, it helps improve the experience of text-to-speech users. By managing the pronunciation, SSML helps the digital voice convey accuracy. For example, it distinguishes between lead or led, wind, or wind, and correctly voices mathematical expressions like functions like minus or negative instead of dash. And for years, it'll convey 2025 as opposed to 2025. SML creates parity, and it provides the same comprehension for every student regardless of reading ability. So what do these standards help? Well, what they basically do is it helps to author once and access everywhere. With web standards as our baseline, accessibility becomes something we build and not something that we bolt in later. The goal here is simple. You author once, access everywhere. What that means is that when we use standards, we create digital assessments that work across platforms, devices, assistive technology without rewriting or re-engineering content. So let's break this down. For structured information, using consistent headings, logical regions, and clear focus indicators means students can move predictably through a test, whether they use a keyboard, a screen reader, or a switch device. This structure also ensures that the same content behaves reliably across operating systems. Textual alternatives to images. For simple visuals, concise alt text works well. But for more complex images, a long description helps convey deeper detail. The key is context. Descriptions should support the learning construct without cluing the answer or adding unnecessary cognitive load. In assessments, that level of precision ensures fairness and validity. The description just provides equivalent access, not advantage. For STEM and math subjects, nowhere is accessibility more technically demanding than in the STEM content. Saving equations and expressions as MathML allows us to represent math structurally, not just visually. This means screen readers, braille devices, and even tactile devices can interpret and render math accurately. And tools like MathCAD allow for the spoken math in styles that match the learner's needs, whether they're using Nemeth Braille, ClearSpeak, or MathSpeak. And when needed, authors can add custom alt text for context, ensuring proper meaning is conveyed. And for text and media, accessible design goes beyond static text. It requires ensuring that the fonts, the contrast ratios, the color palettes, all those things support readability for all users. SSML, it provides control over how text-to-speech voices read test content. We can add pauses, emphasis, and pronunciation to make spoken content sound more natural and more accurate. And for audio-video materials, providing captions, transcripts, and descriptive audio, it ensures access for multimodal learners. Like I mentioned, when we author with these standards, the same test item can be written once and accessed everywhere. The same item can be read aloud, presented in Braille, viewed visually, or converted into tactile graphics without reauthoring, without breaking the construct, and without compromising test security or validity. That's what accessibility at scale looks like. Not just designing for inclusion, but designing for consistency, efficiency, and equity. Greg will now show you how we have used these standards to build our digital test content.
So I want to start by demonstrating how well-defined and consistent structures help College Boards simplify the presentation of our tests. Blue Book, our test delivery application, uses ARIA regions. Throughout these regions include Blue Book controls, passage, image, or other source content, question and answer, question 1 or question 2, question 3, and so forth, answer options, question navigation. Some of these regions are specific to navigating through the application. Others point toward major parts of test content. They all make the application easily navigable for screen reader users. Because we know that many screen reader users prefer to navigate with headings, we also duplicate some of these regions with redundant headings. But structured information doesn't just belong to navigation elements on the page. Test content itself benefits when information is structured logically and accessibly. The images on this slide show different presentations of the same free response question. On the left, the test question is structured as an ordered list. On the right, the test question is structured using headings. Both presentations are accessible and navigable using a screen reader. Either would pass, and both have passed our accessibility test, but we're talking about accessibility at scale. In many authoring platforms, lists like the one at left can be complex to make and to manage. For example, if this question had an image related to one of its parts, it might be very difficult to introduce the image in a way that is logical and in keeping with the assessment's intent. This would significantly complicate how users of screen readers might interact with the content. And in our own authoring tools, ensuring that lists like the one at left remained logical was a headache for everybody. These challenges led us to propose the redesigned item at right. List item A was replaced with Part A heading, B with Part B, and so forth. The structure is communicated visually and semantically. Even images fold into their parts easily and logically. College Board content experts did not need to be told that screen reader users might actually prefer the version at right, because headings are one of the most used methods of navigating a web page. They didn't need to be told because they recognized that the design would make their writing simpler and more straightforward. They signed on to the change and never looked back. In other words, accessible design can improve accessibility compliance by simply making authoring easier. Another way that we use structured information is in our image descriptions. For one, we use ARIA regions to deliver our long descriptions for images. Long descriptions in Bluebook are visually hidden, but they're also easily navigated to by screen reader users, and they're built of structured HTML. Because our long descriptions are semantic HTML and not merely all strings, we're able to give them logical structure. For instance, as the slide shows, we use drill down logic to start from general information and move to specific information. We also follow the logic that's given visually on the image. For example, in this graph, meat, dairy, seafood comes first in the legend, and fats, vegetable oils comes last. Each one of the sublists in here do the same. Making long descriptions a navigable part of the page showed us how we could make other changes. First, we pushed most of our information into our long descriptions. Second, we asked ourselves how we could use the long descriptions to reduce cognitive load. We began by structuring image descriptions as lists. Nested lists allowed us to indicate relationships by using structure, as you saw in the previous slide. Communicating relationships this way helped us write with greater brevity. We cut transitions that work in a narrative paragraph but are unnecessary in an outline. For example, quote, "the figure presents," or "the next series in the bar graph." Because of these changes, College Board image descriptions have on average 41% fewer words than they did in our previous methods of authoring. Another upside to writing lists, screen readers can navigate nested lists quickly and easily using virtual cursors. You might be asking, if you're familiar with this kind of structured data, why don't we use tables instead of lists in our long descriptions? Well, not all graphics lend themselves to tables. Lists help us create a more consistent user experience across a large variety of image types. And we also find that screen readers can perform inconsistently as tables grow more complex, such as with spanned rows or spanned columns. That said, we have occasionally, whenever the time when it's right, use tables in our long descriptions. Sometimes the table is just the best way to communicate the information in front of you. College Board, as an organization, is committed to making tests accessible at the full scale of all of our publishing. To put that into perspective, my team in 2024 wrote 950 image descriptions for assessments, and in 2025 we wrote 2,300. In other words, we measured in image descriptions, we saw a 142% increase in output. And my team's still looking for more to do. So there are several things that you can do in your assessments to increase the scale of your accessibility work. First, create image description guidelines for your assessment program. If you don't know where to start, I recommend guidelines written by the Diagram Center and by NWEA, both of which are available online. Second, keep the principles of focus, brevity, clarity, consistency, and organization in front of you. Third, Work with your subject matter experts to identify the places in your guidelines that might bump against test constructs and plan for what you'll do in those situations. And fourth, create exemplars that help writers see the guidelines in action. Last but not least, write from a template. Templates increase accuracy and consistency when you're writing image descriptions, and they also increase speed. Writers don't need to think about everything in front of them. They can focus on the most important parts. And these principles apply whether you're working with people or with large language models or both. The better you model what you want, the better, more consistent, and more efficient every output will be. Now, let's talk about the accessibility of math expressions and equations. The most important thing you can do is, as Christine said earlier, create and deliver MathML. Tools like MathCat, which are available in screen readers, and MathJax, which are available for the web, provide assistive technology users' choice. Users can interact audibly through alt text, semantically, moving step by step through a structure tree, or tactily using a refreshable braille display. On the next few slides, we'll talk through each of these modes of interacting with math. First, let's talk about alt text. There's been a lot of excellent research and development done to improve the automatic generation of alt text for math expressions. User-facing applications or application plugins like MathJax and MathCat can generate alt text on the fly for screen reader users. Other applications like the speech rule engine can do so behind the scenes at the time of math creation. The primary grammars out there are MathSpeak, which is developed following logic outlined by Abraham Nemeth, and it's generally really literal. There's also ClearSpeak, which was developed by ETS. Its output is more teacherly than MathSpeak. The auto-generated alt text on this table is all ClearSpeak. And then there's SimpleSpeak, which has been developed by Neil Swaffer and is used in MathCat. If you're curious about following up on these, just this year, Neil Swaffer compared these three speech styles in the Journal on Technology and Persons with Disabilities. It's worth checking out. Relying on generated math alt text does increase the burden on your ability to construct well-formed MathML. It requires us all to attend to how the math works and not just how it looks, even though ideally they're the same. But alt text isn't the only way into math when you deliver MathML to users. College Board uses MathJax to deliver the MathML we create. MathJax gives assistive technology users multiple entry points into math expressions. For example, users can step through an expression character by character, and here we'll see a user navigating through it visually. Users can also get Braille output on refreshable Braille displays. When users have these multiple entry points into math content, the stakes for the alt text that we saw on the previous page are lower. You can be slightly less vigilant about whether everything that has a beginning and words also has an end, whether an equation's alt text fits neatly into the sentence, or whether the alt text is completely unambiguous. Because we use MathML and present it using MathJax, we even make it possible for users to switch the alt text grammars in front of them. Here, the same expression is rendered in both ClearSpeak and MathSpeak. In fact, College Board generates alt text at the time of math creation to better accommodate multiple modes of delivery, but in Blue Book, we allow students to change their preferred style from ours if they want to. Last, we'll look briefly at text-to-speech. It took College Board a couple of years to learn what other digital test platforms already knew, which is having text-to-speech built into your application greatly simplifies TTS users' test-taking experience. But it might be worth taking a step back and asking, what's the difference between text-to-speech and screen readers? Text-to-speech reads aloud the visible text on a page. TTS gives students who have a reading disability additional context clues to discern the information that they need. TTS applications, because they only read aloud visible content and not anything else, do that because that's the barrier that students need to have addressed. Screen readers, on the other hand, are designed for individuals who are blind or have low vision. Because of this, they provide a much deeper level of access. Screen readers will read aloud a lot more information than TTS will. For example, they'll read all the information that's visible on the screen. They'll read any information tagged as screen reader only content, and they'll read information about navigating the page, like buttons, menus, your current location, headings, and so forth. All of that will be said aloud when using a screen reader. Now, the newest text-to-speech voices have been trained using large language models, and they are very good. But those voices aren't widely available in operating systems. Older voices need some help. So speech synthesis markup language provides the tools. It provides some tools to control that voice output. With SSML, you can control pitch, intonation, breaks or silences, rate, volume, timing, and pronunciation. But you don't need the full SSML standard to improve text-to-speech output significantly. For example, pronunciation rules alone can improve performance with numbers, such as dates, shown here, cardinal numbers, ordinals, and telephone numbers. They can also give you tools to make substitutions, such as blank for underscore, 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 which a screen reader would read if it saw all of those lines. Small improvements like these go a long way toward making TTS into a powerfully effective user experience. Now, Christine will discuss other ways of delivering standards-based content, other ways that delivering standards-based content creates rich, meaningful test experiences for users of assistive technology.
Thank you, Greg. As Greg just showed you, he basically showed you under the hood how things are done. But now let's look at how standards enable interoperability and the same content working across different modalities. So equal opportunity can be represented with the text-to-speech accommodation, which provides all text of the visible text on the graphic. As you see here, we have an item from our Blue Book item bank, and in the call out is what is spoken using our embedded text-to-speech tool. And we can also see an example of a math test item with TTS displayed, the call out in our demonstration here. Now, for the screen reader user, that requires a full description of the graphic, including the coordinates. What we're showing here is how the NVDA screen viewer reads the same description of the same image, but with more detail. And when content is structured using what we have already discussed, MathML, alt text, and standardized markup, it can seamlessly adapt to visual, auditory, or tactile formats. This means that students who are blind or have low vision, they can independently access complex visual information like graphics and functions in real time. What we're showing here is that we're working with partners to develop an adaptive digital experience on multi-line Braille displays, such as the Monarch and Pad, to expand access to STEM content for tactile learners. We're working with them to pilot a test that we can deliver to students sometime in the very near future. And this is what we mean by equal opportunity, having the same item, the same construct delivered through multiple modes of access. So what works in practice? First, we've learned that early integration during the content creation is very important. Accessibility cannot be something we retrofit at the end of a development cycle. When we design with accessibility in mind from the start, during the authoring, item review, and platform design, it saves time, it ensures consistency, and prevents content loss or having to rework the items later. Another thing, collaboration among every stakeholder, including authors, developers, and accessibility experts, is equally important. Accessibility is not the responsibility of one team. It's shared across all disciplines and all divisions. When content specialists, psychometricians, developers work together, the accessibility features can be built directly into the item templates, the authoring tools, and the delivery platforms instead of being patched in later. Iterative testing with students and educators is what grounds all of this into real experience. Engaging with the users who rely on assistive technology helps us identify subtle barriers, things that we might not catch during QA or UAT or during our compliance checks, but makes a real difference in usability. Student feedback, which we seek very often, has shaped improvements in our text-to-speech fluency, our image description design, and even in our navigation logic. But there are, of course, challenges. Most important one is legacy content. It is one of the biggest hurdles, especially older STEM materials or diagram-heavy items that weren't created with accessibility in mind. Converting these while maintaining constructability is time-consuming and resource-intensive. Then complex item types like simulations or interactive tasks, they require creative solutions to ensure that accessibility doesn't compromise assessment integrity. Multilingual content adds another layer of complexity. We have AP exams in foreign languages. And as accessibility features such as alt text or TTS, they need to maintain linguistic accuracy and cultural relevance across these languages. And we're always balancing test security with assistive technology compatibility. Secure browsers and proctoring tools must allow approved assistive technologies to function correctly. Finally, scaling accessibility depends on training and governance. Embedding accessibility into editorial standards, platform requirements, and professional development, everyone involved in test creation delivery needs the resources and accountability to sustain the progress. So what we've learned is that scaling accessibility isn't just a technical task. It's a cultural and procedural shift. When accessibility becomes part of the workflow, not an afterthought, it's sustainable, efficient, and fair for every learner. So as we come to the end of our presentation about scaling the standards to practice and scaling accessibility in digital assessments, we're putting all these ideas together today as a community. Throughout this session, we've seen how standards made accessibility scalable and how collaboration drives it forward. But scaling accessibility across an entire ecosystem, across vendors, awarding bodies, and technology platforms can't happen in isolation. It takes a network of professionals who are willing to share, align, collaborate, and innovate together. That's why we're launching the Accessibility Special Interest Group within the eAssessment Association. The purpose of this special interest group is to create a global community hub for advancing accessibility in digital assessments, connecting practitioners like yourselves, policy leaders, and educators who share the goal of making every assessment equitable by design. Our focus areas will reflect what we've learned today. Sharing best practices, aligning around recognized standards like WCAG and MathML, supporting interoperability between technologies and assistive technologies so accessible content truly works everywhere, developing shared accessibility evaluation frameworks, giving assessment providers practical ways to measure progress. As an affiliated special interest group, Accessibility joins the eAssessment Association's growing network that includes AI, online proctoring, workforce mobility, and other groups driving innovation and testing. Our addition ensures accessibility remains a visible, integral part of every conversation about the future of digital assessment. By joining this group, we hope that you will help us move this movement forward from individual best practice to collective progress, ensuring that accessible, secure, and valid assessments become the norm, not the exception. So together we can make author once, access everywhere, not just a principle, not just a tagline, but a reality across our industry. So now that we've come to the end of our presentation, we want to turn this over to all of you. We've talked a lot about standards, interoperability, innovation, Well, ultimately, scaling accessibility happens through the choices and priorities made in each of your organizations. So let's reflect together. When you think about scaling accessibility, what does that mean for your organization? So we have a question. The issue with integrating during content creation is all of the changes that occurred during the development and review process. How do you manage this?
I can take that. It's a challenge, to be sure, because as we as test developers, solicit expert advice across, from content experts across, in whatever field we're writing an assessment for. So a couple of ways in which we manage that. One is that we work very hard to build into our authoring platforms tools that make test content accessible from the outset, so that changes won't actually upset our the ways in which our test content interacts with assistive technology. We also work very hard on to partner with content teams, so that when they have content-based changes, they notify us. They work with my accessibility team to make sure that all the way through the process of test development, we're always looking at all of the parts of a test question, to make sure that like, say an image has changed and an image description needs to change to go along with it. Those updates are made across the board. It is, as Christine said, it's both a technological and a cultural, there are both technological and cultural requirements. Requirements isn't quite the right word, but we have to work with our content teams across the board to make sure that we're always communicating all test content to all users.
So I also wanted to add about the culture shift. It's not an overnight process. We did come up with or expanded our accommodations and accessibility policies, moving from paper pencil tests that we delivered over 100 years into a digital environment. We had to adjust our accommodations as well. And these adjustments did not happen without their challenges. There was resistance, of course, resistance to change and people wanting to stick with the paper pencil. But we found that the resistance came more from the adults, the administrators, and the students themselves, who, for the most part, have already started using technology in their everyday life. They found it to be very refreshing. They preferred it for the most part, but we still, of course, offer every opportunity for all students to test in whatever means is suitable to them. And so now paper pencil has become an accommodation. So we have another question. So especially for organizations that are commercial in nature or depend on external funding, many times we want to do good, but we are also dependent on the sponsors or clients' will to finance projects. How can we sell the principle of accessibility? Well, for starters, and I don't know where you're located, but it's in the United States, it's a liability. If we do not provide an accessible experience or an equivalent accessible, equitable experience, we are liable to complaints and lawsuits, which could have punitive damages. And I know now in the European Union, with the passing of the European Accessibility Act this year, And there are going to be damages, fines, and in some cases, imprisonment in one of the countries. So I think, unfortunately, that is one of the selling points about why accessibility matters. But it's basically just doing the right thing. It's making every user have a similar or equitable experience when they're testing. And yes, it is costly. It definitely does not happen without the resources, and it may be costly upfront. But once you finally build it into your processes and into the culture, you'll realize the diminishing returns, or rather the cost will diminish over time. And as we've all heard, when you build with accessibility in mind, you actually improve the experience for all users and not just those that have accommodations. What we are seeing in requests for proposals, we are seeing language for the requirements. We are also seeing in contracts, when you're contracted, and with our vendors, we built it into our requirements, and now they do as well. So if you want to do business with us, you must meet the accessibility requirements. If we want to win a contract, we must also likewise meet their accessibility requirements.
And I would add to that two things. It's not just a question of risk. I mean, there is a space in which people with disabilities are a market, right? Mm-hmm. And they are a market, and in fact, a growing one, especially as populations, especially in Western countries, age. So as we age, like we're all in a continuum of disability, right? We're kind of things are will as I look toward my 50th year, like I can see it my life, going downhill from here. But not just that, but there's also the benefits that come of accessible design. This is the curb cut problem, right? Whenever you build sidewalks with curb cuts, it benefits everyone, not just people with disabilities who happen to use a wheelchair, but also your families pushing strollers, kids riding bicycles. There are ways that you don't know and we don't know that in which accessible design makes things easier and better for everyone.
Okay, so we have another question, well, two more, and somewhat similar. One of them is about we're a global private sector organization and we're prototyping AI-driven assessments. What do you think the implications are for at least text-based assessments in terms of accessibility? Greg, you want to take that? AI-driven assessments.
This is something that have been thinking about too. I mean, the with text, the best thing is that text is delivered in HTML is pretty much accessible from the start, right? We don't have to. We don't generally have to change it, and so like if as GPT or Claude or whatever your large language model is delivers like a Socratic dialogue, for instance, back and forth between a student and the large language model, like that should be generally navigable. But also, as you build into your as you build your prompts and create your AI-driven assessments, you can also tell your AI to use structures. They know, like they've been trained on on web standards just as much as our accessibility specialists have. So build that into your prompt and make sure that the as I said earlier, the the better, the more you know what your output, what the kind of output that you want, the more accessible you can make it, and the better it will work for everyone.
Yep, I agree. And a similar question, in large-scale public assessment environments where we are modernizing exam systems using AI, for example, automated item generation, how can we operationalize WCAG and MathML accessibility standards at scale? So this just basically expands on, I think, what Greg just said, in terms of, building in those standards, those requirements within the model, which will help you then to author, and generate more item types at scale. Greg, based on your experience?
Well, I mean, that's one way. You can also use an AI to fill in a blank, right? It's not, and if you make the blank accessible around it, then if you make everything around the blank accessible, then you have ways to, and I think you're building in your standards into your item template, into your item design. Like it is very much a thoughtful, you start you start thoughtfully at first, and then you fill in the content as you go.
Any more questions? I'd like to hear from anyone who's still on. What progress have you seen, and what barriers are you encountering using AI tools or trying to integrate accessibility? Are there any that we have not covered? Are there any that we don't know? I mean, this is part and parcel as to why we want to start an accessibility special interest group, because we don't have the answers to everything. We haven't experienced every possible scenario. So we want to be able to, communicate out, to support each other. We're happy to, expand on some of our own challenges and how we've navigated solutions. But we'd love to hear from the group too. Is there anything of interest? If not now, again, I encourage you to please join when we get this special interest group started and start sharing and collaborating, because we can all benefit from it. We're happy to, sit down with anybody and go over some of the information and some of our examples in more detail as well.
Can I step back to the last question too? As I was reading it again, so how can we operationalize WCAG and MathML accessibility standards at scale? I just want to touch on the MathML piece a little bit more. Sorry, I know that you're asking another question, but there is, as the MathML standard 4 has just been released, and there are tools in there are ways of built into that standard of identifying intent, and it's built with dictionaries that as we go forward, those dictionaries will help us to define our alt text. They'll help us to define help assistive technologies understand the content, understand what we intend with our math and our science presentations. So I think part of it is knowing the standards well too, and looking forward, looking ahead to what to how assistive technologies might interact with these standards in the future, and should interact with them really soon.
Yep. So there's another question. Are there recommended workflows or validation tools that can ensure every AI-generated assessment item remains compliant and usable across diverse assistive texts? Do you want to start, Greg, or do you want me?
You go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, at the authoring, on the authoring part, they do have checks and balances and reviews, multiple levels of reviews using different platforms and assistive technology. But we also do, before we publish a test form, before we go live, we have multiple layers of UAT testing, end-to-end testing, a platform. So there's a lot of pieces involved. And we also need to, as we've encountered issues, though it may pass in one platform or one version of that platform, it may fail in an older version, or it hasn't been optimized for an updated version. So this is where guides, manuals, and information to the public are very important too. Whenever you're doing, whenever you develop a testing platform, you have to ensure that, your minimum requirements, you have to ensure to communicate with the public that it is optimized for the following. And wherever possible, we also have accessibility features documents. One thing we've also noticed is that we're adults and we may be experts in the space, but we realize that especially with a K-12 population, they might not be as proficient in using their assistive technologies. We built it to be usable by most users, but whenever we encounter issues with students, knowing that they struggle with using their technologies with our assessment, we do a lot of outreach. We do a lot of, if necessary, white glove treatment to ensure that they have a good experience. It's not, we test and retest, but they might find out, there's specific technology or version of their technology which may be older or maybe newer, which we may not have been able to test with, and they encounter an issue, and we address it. We definitely try to help it, and we try to find solutions as well. Anything more to add, Greg? From the content side?
No, I think there are a number of automated tools, accessibility checkers out there, but as Christine said, there's very, like doing, real testing with assistive technologies is just really not much of a substitute for it. And it helps you document, create documentation.
Right, and we what I just mentioned in our processes is that we have partners that assist us. We partner with the accessibility testing companies like Level Access and Barrier Break that provide us with these automated tools, but those automated tools only catches a percentage of the errors. That human testing is the most important factor. And yet still, something might still not go right. We can't, like I mentioned, possibly test against every single version of every single assistive technology on every single platform. We help students whenever something does not go right. If needed, we are able to switch accommodations, switch the modality, and ensure that the student is able to complete one of our tests, because we're high stakes tests. We are, as some parents have told us, we are the barrier to their children pursuing their higher education. And we don't want to be that barrier, especially in terms of accessibility. So we provide every opportunity for them to illustrate the expertise on the subject matter and not the expertise on how to use assistive technology with our application. Any more questions, folks? Yes, we do. Do you know if there's any psychometric studies or work around accessibility? For example, are the tests equivalent in every form? How do we assess accessibility? How do we assess accessibly?
It's a really good question. And some of that is built on our old definitions of what equating is, right? We equate the standard and long-standing models of equating are you deliver items to students to some representative sample of students, and that representative sample tells you how everyone, including students with disabilities, will respond to your items. There has been work on I'm not going to find it. I have a book here that's about the about creating greater intersectionality in equating, and I think that is the space in which we need to be moving toward as we assess our items, and we assess them with in ways that as we assess our items, we do it looking at how lots of different students interact with them across the board. And so I don't know about work that has been done in the past. I do know that we need to do more to psychometrically understand both how test questions work with students coming at them in all kinds of ways.
Yeah, and I wanted to add that, and I don't know the person who is asking is within the United States or outside, but in the United States, especially with state accountability requirements, when they deliver digital assessments along with paper assessments each year, because they're accountable to the state and federal government to some degree, they have to put out reports, the psychometricians do, on this modality issue. So every state has these reports available to them. They're available publicly to through their departments of education for the public to view. But there's also, I think, like what Greg mentioned, there's also the National Center on Educational Outcomes, which again is US-based. And they, on their website, they provide a lot of information because they're focused on inclusion of students with disabilities, English languages, and so forth, and instruction and assessment. So you might be able to find some information as well. The College Board has conducted, our psychometricians have conducted studies, and we have them too under, if you look up at College Board, I believe it's research reports. You can find some. So it's not a one size fits all per se. I mean, it depends on your location. It depends on the requirements. So you can contact us. I think that's the last slide, which has all of our contact information. Feel free to contact us. We can engage with you. Join the Accessibility SIG, which we hope to then be able to share a lot more information. We'll provide more information about that as we come closer to realizing this new special interest group. But we encourage you to reach out to us. We're happy to help. We're happy to share the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we all learn from each other through collaboration and cooperation. Anything else? Our host has gone. Yeah, that's all, folks. Our host has lost connectivity. So I guess we're going to end this on our own. We are very grateful that you spend the hour with us. And as I mentioned, please reach out to us. We're here to help each other. We want to grow this. We want to make sure that we all provide the level of accessibility to everyone who wants to take our tests, to take our classes, to learn from us. So thank you. Gary?
Thank you very much. This is it for your attention.
Thank you.